We're live, Chairman.
Thank you, Sonia. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Rochford District Council's remote meeting of the Executive, and welcome to anyone watching via live stream on YouTube. If I can take firstly agenda item 1, apologies for absence, and I understand that no apologies for absence. In fact, looking around, I can see everyone is here, so that is 100% attendance. If we go around, please, and Sonia, if you can read out any non-members of the Executive who are attending.
We've got Councillor Mrs Gooding and Councillor Sperring.
Welcome to you both. Agenda item 3, the minutes, and we have 2 sets of minutes from meetings held on the 11th of August and the 2nd of September. Are those minutes accepted as an accurate record and agreed, members?
Chairman, sorry, Councillor Sperring has his hand up. And you're muted.
I just put my hand up to indicate that I was a non-member attending, but the hand can't go down. I can't take it down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sperring. Right, can I take it that those minutes have been agreed?
Agreed.
Yep.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Right, we move on to agenda item 4 to receive declarations of interest. Members, are there any declarations of interest? No, no one is indicating as far as I can see by any raised hand. So moving on to item 5, questions on notice from councillors. No questions have been received, members. So we move on to item 6, matters referred to the Executive and reports from other committees, and there are none, members, which takes us nicely on to agenda item number 7, which is the no use empty scheme. I'm going to ask Councillor Ward, portfolio holder for strategic planning, to introduce the report, if he'd be kind enough, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. It's a very, very interesting report. I'll just have a brief outline of what it actually contains. It sets a business case that's been submitted to CELEP, the Local Enterprise Partnership for South Essex, requesting 1.2 million in funding from the Getting Building Fund towards starting a no-use empty scheme in South Essex. The purpose of no-use empty scheme is to provide secure loans to organisations to enable them to occupy and or redevelop long-term vacant buildings. A similar scheme has operated for many years in Kent to great success. In addition to the 1.2 million in funding from CELEP, which individual South Essex local authority is being asked to contribute up to 17,000 in match funding. The advantages of occupying / redeveloping long-term vacant buildings are numerous, but include improving the vitality and viability of our environments, particularly town centres, supporting local employment and avoiding the blight and antisocial behaviour associated with long-term vacancies. The South Essex scheme aims to make as best use as possible of the existing expertise held by Kent County Council, and it is expected that a service level agreement will be agreed with them to enable them to provide advice on the South Essex scheme. Individual local authorities will be expected to identify potential sites in their area. Those wishing to benefit from the scheme will need to apply. Applications under the scheme will be initially reviewed by Kent County Council under their existing frameworks, with the final decision whether to award a loan under the scheme made by the local authority within which the premises are located. Potential premises which might be eligible for the scheme are yet to be identified based on an average loan of 100,000 from the Kent scheme. It is expected that around 10 to 15 premises across South Essex could benefit from the scheme in its first phase. This is likely to be 2 to 3 premises per authority area in South Essex. No projects will be progressed unless there is support from the respective local authority. Similarly, each authority's match funding will only be used if there are projects within that authority area. Therefore, and this is quite important, should no suitable premises be found in a local authority area, or that local authority determines that it wishes not to award to any of the premises that come forward, that authority's investment into the scheme will not be required and would be returned. The council's investment would not be used to cross-subsidise projects in other authority areas. Officers of the council's economic development team will provide day-to-day oversight to the project. However, final decisions as to whether to award loans to any Rochford-based applicants will be presented by the portfolio for Enterprise, myself at this moment, to the executive for approval. It is at this point that the council's match funding would become committed. The risks of the scheme are considered to be relatively small, with all applications being subject to tried and tested protocols used in Kent with individual risk assessments. The council will not be obliged to award a loan unless it feels confident in the soundness of the application before it. A response as to whether the business case has been successful is expected in November, which, if successful, could lead to premises identification and a first tranche of loans in spring, summer 2021. Leader, if there's any questions, I'll be happy, or I will field them off to Marcus, my Assistant Director.
I was going to say, Councillor Ward, thank you very much indeed for that. And just before I do open it up to questions, the lead officer in this is Assistant Director for Place and Environment, Marcus Houghton. I don't know whether you wanted to add any comments before I open it up to further questions.
I think Councillor Ward has covered all the main points. I think maybe just to emphasise that the control does still rest with Rochford. I think that's the key thing. So Kent's really are doing merely a screening job, so they're offering their expertise to risk assess each application. And it's worth pointing out, I think I've got the stats in front of me, I think that they've in 10 years brought in about £67 million investment to Kent. That's over 300 loans. I think that the bad risk is under 1%. So the bad debt of that risk is around about the 1% mark. So you can get it's a low risk investment, and they've done very well, I think, to weed those out before they actually become sort of a live project. So I think all that will be brought to the executive will be safe, or you can never say 100% safe, but in terms of risk, they'll be managed particularly well by Kent before we even get to see them. But the ultimate control of whether we actually want to part with our finances is still with the executive at that stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Marcus. I'll now move to questions from members. Councillor FD.
Thank you, Chairman. Marcus has actually answered a lot of my questions there, but it's just one really that's on there now. As Kent will be doing the due diligence for the loan applications, who will actually be giving the go-ahead for the loans? Would it be an officer from Rochford, or would it be someone from Kent? No,
it will be ourselves. So it'll be the executive. I mean, I think because it's, as you said, it's only going to be 2 or 3 applications. We took the view that actually, it'd be worthy of bringing a report back each time to executive. If there was 50 or 60, we may want to have a different mechanism. But when it's only 2 or 3 that I think you'll be considering, it seemed appropriate to bring them back to the executive each time.
Okay, actually to the executive. The other thing is, what's the real difference between this and a bounce back loan? Would this be easier to get than a bounce back loan, or?
I don't know if it'd be easier.
Just different.
I think it's different. Then obviously it's a secured loan against the sort of actual investment in the property, so it's a bit more considered, I think, in that sense. So it is specifically just for empty properties, and what they'll do is they'll assess the likelihood of being able to repay that back. So it's a secured loan. So there is a little bit more sort of subtle, I guess, hurdles to jump than the bounce back loan.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Simon Smith.
Thank you. You mentioned that the default rate was very low, but just in the news the last couple of days with mentioning the grants that have been given out as a result of COVID, there has been a significant amount of fraud potentially. Is there any information around fraud from experiences so far? Thank you.
I won't profess to know the ins and outs of the scheme to the last detail, but I mean, again, these are well thought out schemes from my understanding that, that they do risk assess and there's due diligence that's done before it's brought to us. And certainly Naomi has overseen that as well. We'll take another look at that if it needs to be risk assessed by ourselves as well. But my understanding is that their ability to manage risk and consider the ability for them to pay back the loan, which is secured, is still considerable.
Thank you, Marcus. And I see that our Section 151 officer, Naomi Lucas, has raised her hand. So, Naomi, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to add, in terms of Councillor Smith's comments, that I think the risk of fraud or in this particular scheme is particularly low. The government schemes that have been in the news over the past few days have obviously been open to kind of speculative applications, and due to the volume and the sort of quick turnaround period, there has been obviously an additional risk of fraud, although we've obviously done everything we can to mitigate that locally. But in this particular case, it's a very targeted scheme and there will be rigorous checks undertaken of each individual business. So I'd say the risk of fraud in this particular instance is very, very low.
Thank you, Naomi. That's extremely helpful. Are there any other members with questions? I'm not seeing any other hands. No, in that case, there are two recommendations, paragraphs 1.1 and 1.2. What I'll do is I'll read them out and then we have a decision to make whether we vote on them separately or take them together. But I will read them first. The first one is to ratify the Council's agreement to participate in a no-use empty scheme across South Essex authorities, subject to a joint bid for Getting Building Fund financing from South East Local Enterprise Partnership, CELEP as it's known for short, being successful. And the second recommendation is to agree that the Council can invest up to £17,000 in match funding towards loans to develop suitable empty properties identified within the Rochford district area. The monies will be held by Southend Borough Council as the accountable body for the scheme and is considered to strongly align with its wider economic objectives and priorities. Now, members, are you happy to vote on those two recommendations together? I would assume that you are, unless I see anyone signalling to the contrary. And I can't see any signalling, so voting will be done on those two recommendations together, and it will be done by a roll call of names. When Sonia calls out your name, please indicate if you wish to have a recorded vote, and then whether you are voting for or against the recommendation, or if you wish to abstain. Sonia.
Thank you. Councillor FD.
No to recorded vote and for the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Rowe.
Thank you, Sonia. No and for.
Councillor Smith.
No recorded vote for the recommendation.
Councillor Ward.
Sonia, it's no and for me, thank you.
Councillor Webb.
Thank you. No and for the recommendation, please.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Sonia. That's no and for. Thank you.
And Councillor Wotton.
Thank you, Sonia. No and for.
Chairman, that's unanimously approved.
So that is unanimously approved, both of those recommendations. Right, moving on to agenda item number 8, which is a projects programme. If I can ask our strategic director, Angela Hutchings, please, to report on the projects report at item 8, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the regular report of the Programme Management Office in respect of those projects which report into the executive. So that's the ICT migration project, which is a gold, the Beagle event project, which is silver, and the Connect programme, which is also gold. Taking those in reverse order, for the Connect programme, members will recall that a report was brought to this meeting on the 8th of July. This project has now begun in earnest. A project manager has been installed to begin, and members, you can expect a full report in the next quarter. In relation to the Beagle event, again, also on the 8th of July, I brought a report to the executive indicating that I would be reviewing the viability of the Beagle event in a post-COVID world, and a report will be brought back to this forum in December. And members, the Wallasey project is a separate agenda item for later discussion. The third project, the ICT migration project, is a closeout report provided this evening, following which the project will be removed from the remit of PMO. And the Assistant Director for Transformation and Customer is here if you have any questions in respect of that closeout report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Angela. Just before I open it up for questions, are there any other members or officers that wish to add further information before we open it up? Again, I can't see any hands. So members, any questions of that report? No, I can't see any questions. So in that case, there is one recommendation on paragraph 1.1 of the report, and that is to note the closure of the ICT migration project and update on the Connect programme. Is that noted, members?
Noted.
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 Noted. Thank you.
Noted.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 9, which is the HMS Beagle Heritage Project at Wallasey Island. I'm going to ask Angela Hutchings, Strategic Director, to please introduce the report.
Thank you again, Chairman. As I mentioned a moment ago, this is the grant funding which the Council made to RSPB to support infrastructure on the Wallasey Island Nature Reserve to promote the district's historic links to HMS Beagle. Works have been completed and come in under budget. A viewing platform has been installed at the sea wall, and benches at lagoons, which are sort of equidistant between the car park and the sea wall. The lagoons are named Darwin, Stokes and Fitzroy, and they are part of a Beagle Trail which has been established on the reserve, which enables visitors to follow the trail from the car park through the down to the lagoons and down onto the sea wall. Interpretation boards have been commissioned. They are yet to be installed. We're waiting for the printer, but they are finalised, and everything else is in place, including new signage, maps, improved car parking and servicing for temporary toilets to be provided by RSPB. There's a small underspend of just over £10,000, which falls to be returned under the normal course of events to the council. But the request from RSPB is that they would use that underspend on a hide and screen near to the lagoon to enhance the visitor experience. It's outside the remit of the original grant funding, Chairman, and that's why it's come back to this forum for discussion. If members are minded to approve it, then the RSPB will continue to use that that underspend. If members are not minded to approve it, then the monies will be returned to reserves. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Angela. And again, before I open it up for questions, I would invite any other members who wish to make a contribution on that report. Councillor Rafferty.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased that the RSPB has managed to bring this in under budget, and having the money back going to general reserves, well, I think will actually be nice to be used for new projects in the future. Because they have brought it in under budget, and they've done what we've asked them to do. I'd just like to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor FD. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Leader. Just a question. I wondered, I've noticed that you've got the maps and signage boards. Are they going to be available from our site to download? Because obviously we want to try and look at a bit of connectivity. So, you know, if people want to download them to their phones or iPads, will that be available?
Chairman, if you're happy for me to answer that question. The interpretation boards themselves are physical explanations of what the visitor is actually looking at. So they have plans that are adjacent to the landscape. But what they will include is a QR code, which takes a visitor to the Discover 2020 website. And on that website, there's a link to the digital CGI funded by the National Lottery, which gives a digital three-dimensional view of the Beagle, both as she would have looked in the southern seas and also as she would have looked moored in Paglesham Pool. And so the experience is enhanced if you access that website from the actual viewpoints, but you can access it from the comfort of your own living room also.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
I should just add, Councillor Ward, that should be launched in the next week or 10 days, and the interpretation boards are intended to be in situ in around the same timetable. There'll be a soft COVID secure launch so that members and residents can be advised that the installations are complete, and then we will do a formal award at some point later on in the year.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Angela. Any more questions, members? I can't see any hands. Councillor Webb.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there's any possibility of match funding for the hide that's been proposed. I understand it will cost about £10,000, which I guess is good value if you're interested in watching birds. But surely there must be other match funding sources that maybe we could look into rather than just paying for the whole lot ourselves.
Councillor Webb, I think that's a really good point. I will come in there with my own comment. I really applaud the fact of what has been produced here, and I applaud even more that through prudent cost benefit, it has come in significantly under budget. There is, for me, a principle that when something comes in under budget, we applaud the fact it's coming under budget. We don't actually find a way of spending the money in a different way. And that doesn't, for me, take away the value of having a hide and a path leading to the hide. I want to make that absolutely clear. But for me, there is a principle here that we applaud and underspend, and we don't find another way of spending the money. It is as simple as that. It's a principle for me rather than the actual issue. So I'm afraid I will not be supporting the recommendation. But I want it clearly understood that in no way minimises, the importance of finding a way perhaps to fund the hide, perhaps in a different way. But we are, after all, considering this project. We're not looking at another project within this report. So I'd like to make that quite clear. Councillor FD.
Come back on that point, Chairman. There's nothing to stop RSPB asking for going down the route of us seeking funding at a later date if they want to with us. And again, it comes to us, the gift to give it or not.
Absolutely. And, I would applaud that. And I think that answers your point, doesn't it, Councillor Webb? Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other members wish to raise any questions? Okay. In that case, there is one recommendation set out at paragraph 1.1 of the report, and that is, I'll read it out, to agree that the unspent part of a £50,000 capital grant made to RSPB by the Council for the creation of facilities to commemorate HMS Beagle be used by the RSPB as set out in paragraphs 3.8 and 3.9 of the report. Now, voting will be done by a roll call of names. When Sonia calls out your name, please indicate if you wish to have a recorded vote, and then whether you are voting for or against the recommendation, or if you wish to abstain. Sonia.
Thank you. Councillor FD.
No recorded vote, Sonia, and against the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Rowe.
Thank you, Sonia. No and against.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. No recorded vote and against.
Councillor Ward. Councillor
Sorry,
Ward.
no and against.
Councillor Webb.
Thank you. No and against.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Sonia. That's no and against. Thank you.
And Councillor Wotton.
Thank you, Sonia. No and against.
That was sort of unanimously not approved.
Thank you, Sonia. And as you heard there, unanimously not approved, and I'm afraid that that's therefore not agreed. Now, that concludes the business for this evening. Thank you, members. Thank you, non-members of the executive, and thank you to members of the public that may be looking in this evening. I now, at 19:56, that's 4 minutes to 8,